this microphone, not because you need the microphone, because it feeds the online so that everybody else can hear. So I'm Steve Lever. I have the distinct pleasure of serving as superintendent here at Octorara. Thank you for coming out. At least it's not as cold as it was a couple weeks ago when it was so frigid. Sorry about the delay this morning. I was overwhelmed by all the Chester County, Lancaster County schools who were closing. Tough call. Yeah, that's so. So what we're in the midst of is kind of some long-term planning for the district, and when you do long-term planning, it's not just thinking about kind of the educational programs. Unfortunately, when you think long-term, you're also thinking about facilities and, you know, where are we going? How are we going to get there? And this started about a year ago when the board was talking about some big projects that we have that have we've kind of been thinking about, but we had a whole bunch of projects that we were unsure of. And so what we decided is we would kind of dig into, schools typically do these 10-year plans where you kind of look at what needs to be done in that 10-year time period, and then you try to accomplish that. So we were at the end of a 10-year plan, and the board really didn't want to make any big financial decisions without understanding what are we facing. So, you know, what are the big things that we're going to have to do? If we spend money here on something that we maybe want versus here where it might be something we have to do and we don't have any choice. And so so that's what you would call a feasibility study, and you bring somebody in and they start to look at all of these things, and typically the project grows. It becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. As you consider more things, we say, well, what about this? And then they go back and look at that, and it just continues to grow. And so through that whole process, and I'll kind of explain how we got to where we are tonight, but through that whole process, there's multiple options that you're considering, and at a certain point, you have to hone in on an option, because then they really dig in to try to tell you what the real costs are. Because a lot of the costs, you know, some of the costs you're going to see tonight, there's not a lot on that, but it's just estimates. And estimates, they try to estimate high, but we just went through a project this past summer where we were doing some athletic fields, and with the costs of everything going up, we were, of course, shocked at how much things had increased. And so that's just part of the game. So so we have a proposal that we've kind of landed on, and it is not where we thought we would be. And it's when we started, I actually told our team, there's no way we can do this year. So just don't even think about it. This has to be a next year, not like 26, 27 year. And so we started to talk to the faculty about it because they were going to hear conversations, and it has just continued to evolve, and to the point that we are now saying, well, maybe we can and should do this year. And so as of tonight, we're kind of looking at that's probably the recommendation we make to the board, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what we're going to do. So what the board valued was, first of all, what do the teachers think about this? You know, this affects them more than anybody else. So we went and spoke with teachers, and I was expecting something different than I heard from teachers. I was expecting them to struggle with change, which it is always hard to have change. But it took about a month after talking to 3 different buildings. It took about a month for the association to come back, because it's not that the association is the teachers union. It's not that they're demanding anything. It's just they tend to speak, and their question was, why do we have to wait to do this? If these benefits that you're talking about are there, why wouldn't we just do it earlier? And my answer to that is, well, first of all, we have to make sure teachers are in line with what we're doing, but then secondly, the community. all the people who are affected by the change. And so that's what we're doing tonight, is kind of collecting information for our board. So that's why Mr. Steffi is back there recording this. We posted the first one. This presentation is really a similar presentation with a couple of nuances of things that we've learned from the first one, just in questions that people asked. So I'll dive in with that intro. So kind of an overview of what we're doing this evening. We're going to take you through kind of the professional analysis. It's not going to be, it's a overarching view. This is a 92-page study, and it's a cure for insomnia. So we'll try to give you some highlights from that. And then we're gonna lay out the rationale for why we're proposing realignment of our grade levels, and then a suggested plan, timeline, and some costs at the end. So here's the recommendation that we're considering. The Octorara Elementary School is repurposed. Why repurposed and not closed? Because we don't exactly know what we want to do with that building. We have some programs in that building that we need to continue running, namely the YMCA program and the CCIU program. So those are vital to our community, and we don't want to see those go. We will have to make a decision on what we're doing with the building, but we're repurposing it, and it's a lot easier to repurpose, and then if we decide we want to do something, we can still do it. But I think over the next 45 minutes or so, hopefully you'll see why we think this is something we should consider. So grades 3 and 4 would join 5 at the intermediate school, and then grade 6, which is currently in the intermediate school, would come up to this building into the middle school. And so we would have a K to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 8, and 9 to 12 configuration, which is a configuration we used to have as a district. And there's a lot of questions around, is there enough space to do these things? And I'll show you some of the data on that as well. So why? Basically, it just comes down to dollars and cents. There's the elementary building is one of our, it's our second oldest building, I believe. In the early stages of looking at renovation, we had actually approved, prior to my arrival in July of 24, I think so, last 2 Julys ago. What's that? 23, okay. Not that it's been, it seems like it's longer or shorter. There was a proposal to put air conditioning in the elementary school, and we had actually allocated money from the federal dollars that we'd received from COVID relief. And early in COVID, there was a lot more flexibility in how you could use that money, and so we had allocated about half of the cost of the project from ESSER's money, which is the federal money. And but by the time we got around to going out to bid and actually planning it, the federal government had changed their regulations, and we couldn't use the money for that anymore. We had to find something else to do with it. And so at that point, we were into this discussion about not about repurposing the elementary school, but about renovating the whole thing and what is it really going to cost. And the early returns coming back from, we use 2 companies, EI, which is, I guess technically they're an architecture firm, but they do a lot of things, but they do these kinds of studies. And then the mechanical side is a company called McClure. And the early returns coming back were that this building was going to take somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 to $15 million to bring back to kind of where we would want it. And some board members asked, well, man, that's a lot for an old building. How much does a new building cost? And the answer to that was about $20 million. So it's like, wow, do we Do we fix this one? And in the 15 million, if we spent the 15 million, it wasn't anything new. It wasn't like, building new spaces, and it was just paint, windows, air conditioning, heating, and kind of new wallpaper, and not a learning space that we would build if we were building new. And so then it kind of came to, wow, is this really a good use of the taxpayer dollars to end up with kind of the same product? Well, then somebody on our team had the idea of realigning, which we were like, well, that depends on what they tell us about enrollment and projections. And so we kind of went back to the people who were doing the study, and we said, okay, we want you to add in this idea of realignment, but it all is kind of conditional upon what the enrollment projections are and some other things. And so when they came back, the enrollment, which I'll show you, we have a lot of room in our district. And we made some decisions previously when we built the intermediate school, which I understand was quite controversial at the time, because there were enrollment studies that were saying the enrollment was really going to go up. And then ultimately that didn't happen. And we had built this new building, and so we had a lot of space in all of our buildings. So, naturally it would be fair for somebody to say, well, how do you know that these studies that you're looking at now are accurate? Well, we don't. We don't know that they're accurate. No, you can't predict it. We just take the information we have and try to make the best decisions that we can make. So basically, we're able to, in considering this, we were able to kind of eliminate the very expensive repair of this old building, because we can take that money and use it in other places. And so part of the 10-year plan is to kind of do renovations throughout the district, address all of our systems, so air conditioning, heating, across all of the buildings. And a decade from now, having kind of everything updated and having the district in a position at that point to consider what's next in the next 10-year plan. Another major issue is this second one here. Probably the #1 complaint that I've heard about Octorara, and this may not sound like a big deal, it's just the thing I hear more than anything else, is we have too many transitions. So we have students in the PLC for 3 years, and in the elementary for 2 years, and then the intermediate school for 2 years, and then the middle school for 2 years, and then the high school for 4 years. And those transitions are hard, and I'll let our principals talk a little bit about that, and Dr. Schultz. But we could eliminate one of those transitions, which it's not a reason to do it on its own, but it's a really good reason if there's other reasons to eliminate the transition. Another thing that we're really excited about, we went back to a model that we had used previously, which is the middle school model. And last spring, we made the decision to do this. We used to have a middle school, and we have teachers in the district who worked in that middle school. And we had a financial crisis more than a decade ago, where the district was being hit with declining enrollment, and they went away from the middle school model because at the time, in order to furlough teachers, there had to be a change in program. And so they changed the program, which allowed for the furloughing of the teachers, but it left us with a 7 to 12 model, which there's a lot of places that are successful with a 7 to 12 model, but what happens is your 11s and 12s get a lot of attention, and the 7th and 8th graders, they kind of struggle to get the attention. And that's why the middle school model is, and I'm a big middle school guy. Dr. Perry is a big middle school guy. I worked in middle schools for a long time. I believe they should be the best 3 years of a kid's life. And in too many places, they're not. And they're not because we don't program for that. We don't account for the age of the kids that are there. And so that became That became even more important when we implemented it, brought Dr. Perry in, and he's putting the things in place. And the middle school is truly a different school today than it was just a year ago. And so he's excited. I don't say he would quit if he didn't get sixth grade, but he really would like to have sixth grade in the building. So how does this impact our budget? That's kind of what's driving this. The change is part of a 10 years facility plan. And this is the thing that we really have to be mindful of. How do we account for all of the things that are coming that we know we can put on a schedule? What happens when you go through tough financial times like Octorara went through? You defer a lot of your maintenance. You find ways that you can save money, and so that has we've kind of gotten to the end of that, where we spent a lot of time last year, Mr. Hurley, we spent a lot of time last year dealing with kind of these crises that would come kind of daily. And we'd like to move beyond that. We'd like to get to a place where we don't have to worry about our systems. We don't have to worry whether, last year, right before Christmas, we had to move the kids out of the elementary school. They came up here to the middle school for half a day because of heat, which is the greatest vulnerability at the elementary school is the heat. And we don't have a solution if it goes down. So the idea is it's part of a bigger plan. There will be cost savings that are realized by repurposing the elementary school, but not, we're not talking millions of dollars. We might be talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, but hundreds of thousands of dollars matter in a budget. And the $10 million that we would have needed to spend on that elementary school, it's not that we're not going to spend it. We're just going to spend it on our other 4 buildings is the plan, so that we can get ahead of some of these problems. And what we really need to do, this third one, is to concentrate our efforts on maintenance, efficiency, and upgrade. And making sure that we're, the thing that I always say is Octorara kids deserve the best that Octorara can give them. That doesn't mean it's Taj Mahal. It doesn't mean it's nicer than everybody else. It just means it's the nicest that we can give them. And that doesn't mean going to taxpayers and say, hey, we need a lot more money. It means we need to be smarter with what we have and figure out how we can do these things in a logical progression that gets us where we want to go, and is as fiscally responsible as we can be. So timing. Initially, we considered the 26-27 school year. I told everybody there's no way we can do this faster, and teachers have begun to say why. And initially, my response, the last time we had this meeting last week, I said, a parent asked that, well, why can't we just do it? And I said, well, because I'm afraid of the teachers. Well, there's nothing to be afraid of with our teachers. What I'm afraid of is, what are we asking our teachers to do? This is a big change. Lots of people packing up their classrooms, moving to a new building. There was a teacher in the first meeting that we had that's been in the exact same room for 22 years. That's hard. That's hard to leave. Now, she did admit that when she comes into air conditioning next year, that will soften the blow. But we initially considered for 26-27. We've accelerated because our faculty are telling us, look, we think we can do this, and we think this is probably worth it. And so now we're coming to parents because we want them to understand the decision. And if we do it in a rush, why would we do that? So this is part of the process of collecting information for the school board, because the school board wants to make an informed decision, and they want the community to understand the whys of the decisions that we make. So in the feasibility study, there were a couple challenges that we were trying to solve for. It was the end of a 10-year plan. We've talked about that. We have 2 buildings that don't have air conditioning, the middle school and the elementary school. When we got that initial bid on the elementary school, that was about $4 million to put air conditioning there. It's gone up. It's now about 6 to 7 to do that. I think I have that right. This is more. The middle school, it's just crazy. It's $8 to $9 million just to put air conditioning in. And so we have an inequity within the district because we have two buildings that at the beginning of the year and the end of the year, it's just a different learning environment. And in today's world, we feel like, well, this building was supposed to have air conditioning in 2013, but because of the financial hardships, it was something that was just deferred. So we're attempting to catch up on some of these. Deferred maintenance I've talked about, and then limited resources. We have to, we don't have unlimited resources in a place like Octorara. We have to be really smart and targeted with what we're doing and why we're doing it. And we have to try to get the greatest amount of value for what we have. So we examined 4 areas. Efficiency, that has to do with room configurations and how are we using our buildings. Planning for the future, so that the decisions we make today aren't the mistakes of tomorrow. That can still happen, no matter how much research we do, that can still happen, but that's what we want to try to avoid. Maintenance, and then ultimately, what do we think the projected costs are for something like this? A feasibility study, they don't just look at the buildings, they don't just look at the windows, and they look at everything. They look at, what are the facilities, the obvious one, but they'll also look at demographics. So what can you expect in enrollment? What can you expect in your students? What changes have occurred? What are the things that you need to plan for? And then ultimately, the thing that is really most important is the educational program. What are we trying to do with our students? OPLC, great school. People love it there, right? They are really delving into fun because kids learn when they play. And schools can become very structured, and we can actually accelerate learning by structuring the way we do things. And I'm a huge proponent of fun. Dr. Perry is as well in the middle school. You want kids to enjoy being there. So the educational program is important to us. What are we currently using our buildings for? What are we currently using our spaces for? What do we want them to be? What do we think will get a better return on investment with our kids? So we have a vision as a district, and it's to empower students to build successful futures. That guides everything we do. If a teacher can show me that they are empowering students to build successful futures, we say yes to that. And we don't want people to think in a very narrow box. We want them to think big. So we're seeing explosions in our CTE programs because we have a director, Mark Patika, who really gets this. He really gets it. Kids need to have experiences that are tied to what they're going to do in the future, not just sitting in a space doing something that's disconnected from what they might want to do or what they might want to learn. So empowering students to build successful futures. How do we do that? The mission is we want to foster a culture of high expectations. High expectations does not mean high grades. High expectations is also for ourselves. What do we expect when we are done teaching? What do we expect kids to be able to do? We want them to be empowered to become lifelong learners. I interviewed two graduates last year from our welding school in the CTE program. And these guys were graduating on Wednesday, starting work on Monday, full time. They weren't getting a summer. And they weren't bummed about it. They were going to make, I estimate, and I asked them, do you think this is possible? And I kind of gave them a number, and they're like, yeah. They're going to make as much money in their first 12 months out of high school as a first-year teacher with a master's degree. They knew they were going into 2 different fields of welding. They both knew that the first year, if you know anything about welding, all they were doing was grinding welds, grunt work. That's what they were doing. And they knew it. But they also knew that if they got this, and for one, it was this certification, and this certification. I'm going to get more money for each certification. And because I know how to do that, when I'm no longer grinding welds, I'm going to be doing this. And the other student, he knew exactly 3 different certifications. lifelong learning. They were not done because they were finished here and they were making money. They had a plan for how they're going to make more money. That's what we envision for our kids. Audrey, Dr. Flojo, is our assistant superintendent. She's unfortunately at a funeral today. But she likes to say every kid should have a plan A, a plan B, and then some pathway if those don't work out. What do they do? And then to positively contribute to their communities. We want students that when they're done, they're ready to contribute to the community they're in. So we value service. We value our kids. We just approved, Mr. Hurley, we approved those students to work at the PLC as a part of our, we do internships and all kinds of experiences, and we expect companies to do it, but we don't hire students ourselves. So in the last month or so, we approved positions. Miss Lease interviewed how many? 5. She has 4 positions. And she said all 5 interviewed better than a series of adults that we've interviewed to come in. And so these are students, yeah, so she's, after this meeting, she's going to say, can I have one more position? I just need one more. So we want them to positively contribute. Work in your schools, work, in the community, do things for others. So I'm going to ask Ms. Lease to come up. And so now the principals and directors are going to kind of talk about the educational program as it is. This is really from as we developed this presentation, it became why realignment is good for us. That wasn't what our intention was, but as they started to develop it, that's what it became. So thank you, Krista.
I'll treat you.
Yeah.
There we go. So as I was listening to Dr. Lever, I was thinking about 3 years. And in 3 years, it does make a difference between 2 years. And I like to say I have the kids for about 3.5 because we do a lot of pre-kindergarten outreach, and we start meeting families right about now. I've been to Curiosity Corner this month. We had our Come Explore the OPLC. We had about 40 families show up. So we're meeting our incoming kindergartners now. So it really is about building a community. And when the vision and the mission of the district was recently, I guess, revisited and refined a little bit, our staff at the OPLC, we sat down and we looked at what's the mission of our building? What do we want the kids leaving the OPLC to be able to do? And we build this foundation. We want kids to grow socially, emotionally, and academically as a community of learners. We really strive to foster a nurturing, engaging, inclusive environment where strong foundations are built. A majority of our learning is really on literacy and numeracy. We feel it's our responsibility. We know reading is very important. We want to teach the students the skills to be readers, and then once they leave us, then maybe they're reading to learn. But we really feel like when they leave our building, they should be reading. Social and emotional growth is fostered. Last year we started with a morning meeting, and we really just want to build that. Every classroom is its own community, every grade level is a community, every bus is a community, and we can all learn from each other within that community. And now the elementary school and the intermediate school has also followed suit, and they have morning meetings. And I really find that it's a great time to learn about each other. So many times, everybody's passing in the night, everyone's on this, a tablet or a thing, and we don't get a chance to really just know the kids and know each other. And I think the classroom meeting has really given us that opportunity to know our kids, and in turn, they know us. I mean, a lot of the kids know that I have a senior in high school and I have a daughter in college because we talk about them. That's important to us and it's important to them. Family partnerships are valued. We start making connections with families, like I said, even before they step in our building. That is really important. I look around the families that have come out tonight. I look around the families that have been at the last town hall, and these are involved families, and it really does make a difference. We our last town hall, I'm like, there were PTO families and coaches, and I see the same people here, and it really does make a difference about your kids. You're valuing education, and your kids know that. Safe, supportive environment is top priority. We really want to build this community within our school that kids know, You know, maybe this is a safe place for them. We know that some kids come to us with a lot of trauma in their background, so we want to be there for them. We have built in a lot of resources over the past couple of years. We have a mental health therapist on staff, a behavior therapist. We have the mental health therapist, the behavior therapist. There's one more. Oh, well, it'll come to me. School social worker, thank you. And the nice thing about, like right now, a lot of those supports are spread amongst 3 buildings. So if we were in 2 buildings, yes, we'll still have the same amount of kids, but at least those resources could be between 2 buildings. And finally, you know, learning is fun. We want to build opportunities and lessons and activities for kids to know that they can experiment, they can be curious. Right now, our kindergarten team is on this journey, and they are learning, they're reading a book called Purposeful Play, and we really want to integrate more purposeful play into our curriculum because we understand that so much learning comes through play, and I kind of feel like that's been a lost art over the past couple of years, so we definitely want to bring that back. In fact, next Wednesday, some of you will be hearing shortly, that we are going to be celebrating Global School Play Day. It's really this Wednesday, but we're going to do it as a district next Wednesday because it's also the 100th day of school this coming Wednesday. So there's a lot on our plate. But that is an endeavor that we are definitely looking forward to, and you'll be hearing about that in the future. You know, the nice thing about working with Dr. DeHowe in the elementary school that we've worked together for years, so it's been really seamless in building this foundation to flow naturally into this year, 3rd and 4th. So I don't know, Dr. Schultz is going to talk a little bit about 3rd and 4th. Being new in an elementary school, you catch everything and anything, and I believe that is Dr. DeHowe's problem, right?
Yeah, so my name is Chris Schultz. I'm the director of the CIA, Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, so no worries. And I'm pitch hitting for Dr. DeHowe tonight. So one of the reasons I felt that I could pinch hit for her is one, that I've worked very closely with her for the last 5.5 years. Another is I spent 15 years in a district prior to here. I worked as a as a 4th grade teacher for 6 years, and then I taught 3rd through 8th grade as a gifted support teacher for 9 years. So I've seen the 3 years, having the 3, 4, 5, and the 6, 7, 8, and I've seen how well it can work. And what you'll see I'm stealing her slides, so what you'll see from Dr. Tahal's slides here are really just what are the advantages and the challenges that we have in a 3-4 building and a 5-6 building. So the 3-4 building and the 5-6 building share UA staff. So what that really does is it really drives the schedule. And I know Dr. Tahal had a lot of trouble putting the puzzle pieces together. Our 3-4 Amplify curriculum requires 2 full hours, 1 hour skills and a 1 hour knowledge strand. And then in 4 and 5, it's 90 minutes. It doesn't sound like it's that big of a problem, but when you're sharing your UA schedule, it just creates a very unique challenge. Our special areas teachers, unified arts, thank you. And also our English language development staff. They're shared across 3 buildings, and being able to bring them to 2 buildings, we have the same amount of people that can serve the same number of students, but can be in more places at once. Instead of having to share that time between the 3 buildings, they can just be spread across the 2 buildings. One of the things that in just a 2-year strand, a 3-4 building and a 5-6 building, is you only have 2 years with that same group of students. In those 3 years, you really get to have a longer time of working with parents. You have a longer time of working with the students. You get to see them as a 3rd grader. This is my experience. I got to meet students as a 3rd grader. I knew about them. I knew many of their brothers and sisters. And then I had them in 4th grade. I could go down the hall to those 3rd grade teachers. I could ask about data. You know, what did they see from this student from last year? What was something that they needed to work on? What worked for this student? I'm having trouble kind of reaching him or her. What worked for you? And it's a very natural conversation that you can have when you're just going down the hall. One of the things in my job here, I'm new to the curriculum job, but I was a K-12 integration specialist for 5 years in this district. So I had the great fortune of being able to meet everybody and get to know everybody. And one thing that I did learn was that that Highland Road can be the Great Wall of communication. For whatever reason, it's really tough when you can't just go down a hallway and have that casual conversation with a colleague to have that casual conversation with a colleague. It has to be through email. You have to wait for professional development days. It just becomes much more difficult to have that. One of the other problems in a 3-4 and then a 5-6 building is just the lack of consistency with the transitions and with the interventions and supports that we can do across the building. We have the same number of people that get spread out through those different geographic locations. Even though they're very close, there is travel time that goes into them, and we lose those interventions. Also, when you lose those interventions, when you rebuild a schedule every 2 years, that's a different puzzle that needs to be put together every single year for those 2 grades. When you have one person putting together the 3-year scope, then you have that longer term look at getting our students from where they are to where they need to be. And then finally, Dr. Howe and her staff, when we were relooking at our vision and mission statements, the elementary school took another look at their vision, and this will travel to the intermediate school, and it will continue to be the intermediate school for the number one reason that it is carved literally in stone on the building. So it will continue to be the intermediate school, but empowering students to actively engage in their learning and develop ownership of their social, emotional, and academic growth. That's a really appropriate vision statement for upper elementary, those students that are gaining in their complexity of skills, that are ready to move on to a middle school with Dr. Perry and really grow in their skills and grow in their collaboration with their peers. And that's where that middle school piece, and I'll let Dr. Perry talk more about that, but that's where those peer groups really become much more important. So final thoughts, having 3 years, we're able to build more consistency and time to build relationships with the students, with their families, have more consistency with those student supports. Having those 3 years, it gives us that goal. By the end of 5th grade, we need to have as many students reading on grade level as possible. And it gives us more of that time to work with those students and intervene on those students who need that extra help. We have increased opportunities in my job now. Vertical alignment and curriculum, that's my love language, and that's something that I've been working incredibly hard since I've taken on this position, is being able to have that spiraling review of concepts, and then we gather more and gain more complexity as we're moving through the grades. And then finally, we want to support those students, and I'll say it again, getting them to be on grade level. There's a ton of data out there that if we can have students on grade level by the end of 5th grade, their trajectory skyrockets for them. So, Dr. Perry.
All right, thank you, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for coming out. My name is Dennis Perry. I am new to Octorara after a career in New Jersey as a high school, middle school principal, and I'm incredibly happy to be here and really excited about the potential to have 6th grade join us here at the middle school. So a little bit about me. 26th year as a principal, 11 of which I've spent as a middle school principal. And as I mentioned, my first year in Pennsylvania working, but I was a student of Bucks County when I was younger, and also Shippensburg University back in the day. So February already, can't believe it's February. We had a very quick January, a lot of stuff going on at school. It's been a great time with your children. The middle school children, I see some of the parents here tonight. Thank you for sharing them with us. They are wonderful, and we are enjoying them. Over the break, so I have a wife and 2 children. I have a daughter and a son. My daughter's 26, my son is 22. And every time we have some days off, we carpool with my in-laws. And what we'll do is we'll rent it like a conversion van, and we'll go on a nice trip and do this carpool thing. And so we'll take turns driving. And so one of the things that I noticed last year when we went was that I would get into a panic every time we came to a tunnel, which was weird because I can go over that like Chesapeake Bay Bridge thing. I could do the Burlington-Bristol Bridge. I can go on 95 really quickly. But anytime we came to a tunnel, I would freak out. And so this year, when I knew we were going to carpool again, I went to see someone about it because I was concerned. And I talked to the doctor and shared my experience with him, and he said, okay, he said, it's very common what you're suffering from. You're suffering from carpal tunnel syndrome. All right. All right, so in any event, so middle So for middle school, right? Middle. There's a reason why we have middle schools. If you have a middle school child at home, and if you've had a high school child and an elementary child, just the simple act of asking them to clean their bedroom gives you a very, very different response, right? An elementary school child is either very compliant or they might whine a little bit about it. High school child, you might get a certain kind of response from. Middle school child often will, you'll immediately get an explosion from them, right? And that's age appropriate, right? That's middle school children, right? That's the amygdala having a much bigger impact on their behavior than their rational thought area of their brain, right? That's developmentally appropriate. So when we think about a middle school, as we get set back up here on the screen, we want to have 3 years dedicated to children and to adults who understand the children that are in front of them, right? We want teachers who have spent time learning about the differences of young adolescents versus old adolescents, so that their responses to them, the structure that they create for them in school, the way in which they interact with each other and with the peers they set up, is appropriate to their age. So we want a middle school that is responsive to their academic, social, and emotional needs, right? Middle school children in a junior, senior high school setting are not being serviced as well as they could be if they were in a school with a structure like teaming, with advisory, with flexible scheduling, with activities and people that actually see them and give them that sense of belonging each and every day like we will in a middle school. We want a middle school education to be challenging. The children should have ample time, with time not being a factor for their learning. A middle school here at Octorara would not have bells, right? It would be an opportunity for every team of teachers to decide how long each activity should take, how much time the children need for other kinds of activities, so they could structure each day, each week, each quarter around the needs, both social, emotional, and academic, as well as making challenging curriculum decisions for them. Should be empowering, right? The end goal, as was mentioned in a variety of ways here tonight, would be for children to leave us as independent learners. We want children to be independent when they leave us. So we want them to be empowered. We want children that are able to advocate for themselves. And that only happens in an environment where they feel safe, happens in an environment where they feel as though they belong, where they feel as though they can ask questions and seek answers. We want students to be able to be empowered in their education. And a middle level education should be age appropriate. The activities in which we interact, the structures, social conflict is part of middle school, right? So we want folks who are trained in helping children to navigate those social landscapes that we have in middle school. We all remember middle school, what it was like, and interacting, and we all have either fond or not so fond memories from that time. We know the importance of having an age-appropriate structure for our children. And finally, it needs to be engaging. And not just behaviorally engaging, but cognitively engaging, right? We want children who are thinking about learning. We want children who are able to represent and support their assertions, not just give answers, not just see if they got the correct answer, but to think through problems in a deep way. A middle school structure with the time no longer being constrained, set up in teams where we have advisory time and where we have other opportunities during the day, meets those needs for students to be engaged both behaviorally as well as cognitively. So thank you. This time I'm going to hand it, I believe, back to Dr. Schultz for curriculum. Sir?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Dr. Flojo put this slide in as a shameless plug for curriculum. And so I will take the opportunity to talk curriculum a little bit more with you. In a vision statement that we worked on here, and I won't read it to you, but you'll notice some of the key words is developing that social emotional intelligence, critical thinking, and independence. And that's what we want for our students. We wanted to anticipate future opportunities and guide students towards that fulfilling life, and having them contribute meaningfully to society. And in our mission statement, you'll see the word rigorous and vertically aligned curriculum. That was me, the vertically aligned curriculum. And part of that is we want our students to become those critical thinkers and ethical leaders. We want to equip them with knowledge and skills to navigate real-world challenges and lead with purpose, resilience, and impact. And that resilience is a key word there because, as Dr. Floja says, they have a choice A, a choice B, or a plan B, and then that ability to pivot. They have the skills to pivot when neither of those options are working out, and they can move to where they need to go.
So that's kind of the educational program piece. And EI and McClure don't work on that, but they ask us to work on it so that we have a clear understanding of what we're trying to do, because that's how they advise us on what to do with our buildings. So I'm going to move somewhat quickly through these slides. These are available online. You're not going to be able, there's going to be some things that you're not really going to be able to see what it is, but it's available on our website, and I'll show you that at the end. So I'm going to move kind of rapidly, but this is kind of this is the rationale for why we think we have enough space. So in the study, McClure and EI determined two things. First of all, we have capacity in our buildings without the elementary school to do the things that we want to do. And they came up with a figure of between $46 and $56 million to renovate over 10 years. So everybody says, well, that's easy. We'll pick the 46. The 46 is realigning and not having to spend that $10 million in the elementary school, and putting our resources in other places. So this is kind of what the feasibility study looks like. We're not going to get into it. This is just one page. It'll show you a ranked priority. So a 1 is your house is on fire. You had better fix this right now. That's our boiler at the elementary school currently. It's really in bad shape. If it goes down, you can't get the parts, you can't get the controls. You have to replace everything. Or you have to bring in something to supplement it. And so that's a 1. A 2 is you got a little bit of time, but if you don't fix the 2, it's going to become a 1. And then the 3s and 4s are the niceties. You want to put we have a courtyard out here, and what we would like to do is we'd like to put an awning in, out there so that we can have, an outdoor space. That's the 3s and 4s. Adding on an addition, knocking down walls and creating a new type of space. Those are all in the 3s and 4s. This number that I showed you is just 1s and 2s. And so we've got some constraints, and we've got some decisions that we have to make around that. So this is the 92 pages. It's just lists of things and projected costs. A lot of the things that are in there we can do ourselves. Our team, if we have a really well-designed plan, over the summer, we can tick off a number of things in the summer months. And then there's other things that we have to bring in construction companies to do. This chart is from 2004-05 school year to 24-25 this year. It's the numbers of students in every grade level. Okay? And so this is our historical enrollment. And you can see the red circles are high points. So we had a high of 2,714 students in 2008, 2009. And you can see the numbers have continued to drop under 2,000 this year. Now it's a little bit misleading because 2012 was 2324, and this year is 1938. We actually changed the way we calculate students because all of these numbers above this year included students that are, we have a Homeland Security program at the training center, we have 65 students there, but half of them are from other districts. It's not physically on our campus, it's at the Chester County Training Center. We took those students out of the equation. the students that aren't ours. And then students that we send to out-of-district programs, we took those out because we needed this number to be real to what we're trying to do right here on our campus. So the drop has not been so great between last year and this year. It's just this number is, we're trying to control for what do we have to deal with right here. So that's why we went with a number that's more accurately depicts where we are right here on campus. So there's three ways when you ask somebody to tell us what's going to happen in enrollment. The quick answer is they don't know. Nobody can predict that. But they have three ways that they do this. First of all, Pennsylvania Department of Education, which is notoriously the least accurate, but they have a calculation, and that's this first method. And if you project out to 2033, 2034, okay, you project out that far, PDE says we're going to be down to 1,650 students. So we're going to drop another 300 students. There's another method that says, okay, who's in first grade? What are live births? There's a whole bunch of calculations. And that's one that maybe it's more accurate, maybe it's not. That one says we're going to have 1,775 in 33, 34. Then there's a third method that is to take all of everything that we know that is on the books right now for housing developments. And we have, Matt, that thing, it's between 300 and 500 units, right? 300 and 500 units that are currently in the planning process. It doesn't mean that they're going to build them. It just means these are things that are in the planning process. And so they take all of that housing, and that's another projection. And that one says if all of the housing that's currently proposed 10 years from now, then there's a formula for every house that they build and the type of house that it is. If it's a townhouse, it's one number. If it's a 3-bedroom house, it's another number. And that says that we'll be at 2138. So you're using different numbers to say, okay, what do we think is reasonable? Understanding that if something big happens in development, these numbers can be completely blown out of the water. So this is the three methods. And again, if you really want to study this, you can pull up the presentation. But this is the PDE, and it just is showing you where their numbers are, okay? Most importantly is this. This is so this is the capacity of our buildings. So this is the PLC. The purple number up here is PDE's number. The way PDE captures space in a building is they'll go to Miss Lisa's building and they'll say, you have 28 rooms, you can put 25 kids in those rooms, and they're there all day. Well, that really doesn't happen in a school, but that's why the PDE number says you have this great capacity, but this red is more like what we do, which is we don't put 25 kids in a kindergarten classroom, we might put 18. We only have 22 in an elementary classroom. So this red is kind of our number. Now, understanding this is the true capacity. If we were in real triage, we could go really high. We could have 25 kids in classrooms, and teachers wouldn't have their own room. They'd travel to a different room every day, every period. But the red is where we say this is really what we believe is our true capacity. So these lines that you see are the three different methods of calculating enrollment over the years. So the darker blue is PDE. So that's this one. The green one is the live birth method. And then this teal, baby blue color, whatever color that is, that's your housing. So we use that to say, okay, what really can we do? And then this is, when you add up our capacity, what we have in our buildings is actually capacity for 2,536 in our 4 buildings. It's higher if you add the elementary school. And so you add another 400 to that. We don't think in the next 10 years we need capacity for 3,000 students. And so that's why we're like, okay, well, which is the building we wouldn't spend money on? The elementary school. Because we have capacity for 2,536 students. So in all of these housing models, we actually have what we need. OIS and the PLC are actually the two buildings, and if I'll take you back and look at this. See how much room there is? Even when we move the 6 to 8, see how much room there is in the middle school and in the high school? There's a lot of room. Now, again, it's fake because that assumes there's kids in every room every day for every period, and that's not the way a high school works. There are empty spaces. The PLC and the intermediate school are a little bit tighter. And so if our worst were to happen in 10 years, those are the two buildings that would fill up first. But they're also the two buildings that are the easiest to add on to because they've been built that way. So in the intermediate school, as you look at the intermediate school on the left-hand side, you'll see there's a driveway that goes around. It would be very easy to add on classrooms. And so we don't think we're going to need classroom space, but if we do, this is where we would build the classroom spaces. So this is the proposed costs. Status quo, so keeping all of our buildings and fixing them is option 1. The one that we're recommending here is option 2, which is we repurpose the elementary school. Now somebody asked me earlier, what does that mean to repurpose? We don't know. We know we need to keep it open for the YMCA and CCIU classrooms. And it doesn't mean that we can't have kids in that building long term. We can. We would have to put some systems in place. We would have to spend some money probably eventually there. It's just not $10 million. So it could be walling off some. It could be knocking down parts of the building and leaving parts of the building. That's the architects tell us you got about 2 years to figure that out, because you're going to have to do something or else the building becomes to a point where you have to just knock it down. So this is the option that we're recommending. So I think we've pretty much talked about all of the benefits. I don't know that there's anything up here, so I won't belabor that. What are the challenges? Logistics. There's a lot of questions we don't have answers to. We are not making this shift to save on staffing because we don't have fewer kids. We just want to be more efficient with our staffing. So a mental health specialist is in a building, in just 2 buildings instead of 3 buildings, so has greater access to the students that are in need of their services. So the logistics is who's moving where, how do we pack it up, what are we doing? We'll actually, if this is ultimately what we're going to do, we'll put together a team of teachers and then also a team of parents to help us think about what do we have to think about as we're planning this. Building and facility adjustments, that's just, we are going to be adjusting every year now for the next decade. Every year there will be, okay, so what's the system we're doing now? What's the one we're doing next? Because the goal is to, at the end of 10 years, to have everything to a level that we're not really worried about it. And we'll see if we can get there. Adjusting and adapting, that's what we'll do as much as we need to, and that's something we'll do annually. And then communication, just being clear with people, why we're doing it, what we're doing, how does it impact them. And with that, what questions do you have? I want to show you before, as we're doing that. So on our website, you see where it says our district, right there. If you click our district, you'll see this, feasibility study. And that's where there's links to this presentation are there, the video of the last one, it's where this video will go. And then there's a whole bunch of questions that we've collected, and we've tried to provide answers for people because that's what we want. We want people to have information. So what questions do you have?
It sounds, My name is Mike Hoffman. I'm from Parksburg. For anybody who doesn't know me, it sounds like we don't know exactly what's going to happen with the elementary school coming up. My question is, the programs that are going now, are we making money off of those? No. Okay, so in 10 years, we're still going to have a building that needs to be updated at probably more than $10 million at that point because it's not been touched for 10 years, correct? So how are we going to plan to pay for that? And
Great question. I think conventional wisdom is we'll have to take it down. It'll at a certain point, it will be construction of an older building. Like if we decided that 8 years from now we saw enrollment was skyrocketing and we were hitting that 2,500 and we were like, oh man, we really have to do something. That might be a site to build. We have acreage behind the intermediate school that we can build on, but the architects are saying the most likely thing that you're going to do is you're going to begin to phase that down, and it could be reallocated as field space, but we're not planning to renovate that building, but it doesn't mean that we lose all of it. We might be able to keep some of it.
so are we keeping that up now solely because of the Y and the CCIU program?
You mean for next year?
Correct.
We'll keep it open because in order for us to close is a different process than just repurpose. So we'll put probably a high school program there. We have a virtual academy and we have a space where kids come to test and to do things. We'll probably put that there because we have to have some of our students in the building to repurpose it. But long term, we have to come up with a solution. The PLC has a little bit more room. I don't know if they have room for everything we would do, but we think that it's viable to keep a portion of that building open, and we might be taking down other portions. But that's again, we have 2 years to determine what we'll ultimately do with the building. But we do really value the CCIU program and the Y program because those are programs that are pre-kindergarten, and those really help our students as they come into kindergarten. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, so first off, Jason Campbell, great presentation, liked all the information. One of the things that I found really interesting was the enrollment continuing to drop from mid-2000s. Do we understand why? Has a lot of research been done there? Why, and how does that compare to other school districts in the area? Comparable school districts. And then last question to add on, sorry. You mentioned adding capacity. I think from a footprint standpoint, it seems like it could be realistically done, but as far as a dollar value to add the capacity, what estimates do you have there?
Yeah, interestingly enough, when I talk to these architects, I feel like I'm talking to a used car salesman. So they tell me to add 4 classrooms onto OIS. If we wanted to do that next year, it'd be about $1 million. It's $6 million to put air conditioning in an old building. No, it's brick and mortar. It's actually extending the building. But an excellent question. Jill, make sure you write this one down because we need to put this one in. We have 671 Amish students that live within Octorara School District and go to Amish schools. So if we didn't have an Amish population, that would be a big bump. There's another 200 students that are in charter schools that we pay tuition to charter schools. One of the things that we would love to see, and we have the capacity for all of those to come back to experience our programs. Yes, we are studying that. There's other kids that are in private schools. The private schools is the harder one to nail down. The Amish schools report to us. The charter school kids, they report to us, but the private school kids don't. So it is conceivable that we could push those boundaries. What that would mean is Octorara has become a great place that kids want to go. And last year I had a realtor, it was a painful day. A realtor say to me, there's homes that want to be built, but people aren't too excited about your school district. And I appreciated that honesty. And so that's why we talk about the program. And that's why we talk about the opportunities for our kids, because we believe that we can offer something to Octorara that people are going to really value. So we will be victims of our own success if all of those kids start coming back. But it will be a nice problem to manage. But we, like I said, we can handle 500 students, 600 students coming in, and really we'll kind of be at our capacity. Now, those kids are not evenly distributed. If they're heavily in the PLC, we might have to, I mean, it seems to me, that's the places we will have to build first. The high school, what happens is they leave and then they come back in high school. So we see about 80 to 100 kids come back for high school. Other question you asked was kind of where are we seeing it? If you look at that chart, the first one I showed you, all the numbers of the enrollment, you'll see that it's pretty consistent. It's all of the grade levels. So we see it kind of across all of the grade levels. Any other questions? Yes.
Kim Chappelle, West Fallowfield Township. Just to confirm, I think you said there wouldn't be any teaching staff implications as far as the shift goes? No loss of staff. Another question. Since 2 grades are going to be going into a currently 2-grade, the intermediate school will end up with 3 grades rather than 2 grades. So when there are 3 grades there, are there enough rooms to accommodate all the classes that will exist without class size growing?
Yes, so that's part of the study that we're looking at is EI goes and they sit with all of our principals and they look at the rooms and how rooms are being used. What we have is we have some rooms where there might only be a handful of students in there once or twice a day. And those are students that we can do something with those students in another part of the building. So yes, there is capacity in that building. PLC actually is built for 4 grade levels. So there's even greater capacity in PLC than but we don't want to overload. Like I don't want to just quickly move the YMCA and CCIU into the PLC, even though we probably could, but we don't. That's not necessary at this point, and we don't want to overcrowd the buildings that we have. We just want to try to maximize our space. Great question. Thank you. Did that answer everything? Yes. Anybody else?
You say no changes till faculty. How about support? Lunch ladies, groundskeeping, stuff like that.
So our groundskeeping is outsourced. Our lunch ladies, we just got fully staffed like within the last 6 weeks. And what we don't have is if any of them are sick or if any of them are gone, we just run short. So we would keep those people in place to just make sure that our kids are being served well. There is always, as people retire and people leave, there could be a position that falls to attrition. I don't really anticipate that. Staffing a middle school is a little more intense than a junior high, and so we're not really looking to save money there. We're going to save money in operational costs in the building, but we feel pretty comfortable with the number that we're at for staff for the number of kids that we have. Understanding that once the configuration is complete, we may find further efficiencies. So we're not just done looking for efficiencies. We'll always be looking for efficiencies, how we can do things a little bit better. Anything else? Yes.
Keith Prickett, Christiana Borough. I have a couple questions about the middle school. I have a daughter who is in 5th grade and will be traveling to 6th grade, so it's particularly interesting to me. So when the 6th grade joins the middle school, does that mean the 6th grade now goes from the OIS model of timing and whatever, And would it go to like the arrival and dismissals being equal across 6th through 8th?
So they would move to the secondary arrival and dismissal times.
Okay, okay, cool. And the other question was, again, about the 6th graders joining the middle school. Would that allow them to avail themselves to like the sports and the clubs that are currently accessible to the 7th and 8th graders?
Absolutely. That and more. I mean, particularly when we talk about the clubs and activities, we're really looking forward to having the 6th graders come. And in a middle school model where we have a dedicated staff for middle school, we really see that mushrooming and growing. Yeah. Thanks.
PIAA will have something to say about 6th graders playing, but a teacher did come to me to talk she made an appointment with me to talk about the possibility of intramurals for 6th graders coming up. Another residual benefit, nobody has asked, but it was asked and it's in our questions. What about music? Look, we want to see every program grow. And so our intention is to leave the music teachers in the intermediate school, which currently our music, instrumental music, vocal is in the elementary already, but our instrumental goes only to 5th grade. But by moving 6th grade up and moving 3 and 4 in, we're able to push instrumental down further. So our intention is to leave instrumental music there, because we want to build that even more. And so that's really, your question about clubs and activities. That is key to student development. The single greatest correlating factor to student success is their parents' educational attainment. Okay, so if mom and dad have master's degrees, those kids do well in school. Okay, kid has no control over that. Okay, the number 2 strongest correlating factor is the student's involvement in something. And it doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter. It can be sports, it can be, I always say sock puppets. It can be whatever. The more things kids are involved in, the better they do in school. And so that's why, Dr. Perry and, Ms. Lease, and, this is what we want. We want kids active. We want them engaged in things because it translates to student success. Any other questions? Yes.
As far as funding goes, well, actually, just to take a step back, the options, again, you had mentioned possibly building a new school for $20 million, and then the refurbished option to then realign the grades. That was, I think, $55 million top end, somewhere around there. So that $20 million option, would there have to be some refurbished to go along with that $20 million, or would that just be for the middle school, and then for taxes and funding of any option that's selected?
So the $20 million that I mentioned was the projected cost for a new elementary school. We're not proposing that it's funny because EI, the company that's working with us, they told me last week they're out around the state telling people that they convinced us we didn't need to build another elementary building. That's not really the truth. We weren't really thinking we wanted to build another elementary building. It was just, if we're having to refurbish this one, that became an option. But we don't need to build a new elementary building. We don't need that space. We need air conditioning, and we have air conditioning at the intermediate school, which means we need to add air conditioning at the middle school. So that becomes a project that we start to talk about right away, as opposed to trying to get air conditioning in one first and then waiting for the other one, which could take 5 years to get to the second one. So this is the fastest pathway to getting us where we need to be. What we're trying to do is we're not locking into, I showed you some big numbers, we're not locking into anything, because the one thing I know about our board, they don't want to lock in a future board to something. So what we're doing is we're setting up a plan and a financing structure that allows us to do this slowly and over time, deliberately. Now, some people will say, well, you need to do it right now. Well, we're not sure that that's financially the best thing for the district and for the taxpayer, because we're trying to do this with those things in mind. Does that answer your question? Not really.
So on the second part, as far as funding, are there plans to increase taxes to fund if it does go up to 55 million?
There's always, if you're talking about a 10-year period, the only way we can keep pace with inflation is through some measured tax increase. This plan is not predicated on us raising taxes. You might remember that we went through a solar. We're putting in a solar array, and one of the major reasons to put in the solar array is because with the short version of it is we can now own it, and if we own it, we get all the savings. Previously, whoever owned it got the savings, and the districts just got a little bit. Now we get all the savings. So what it's allowing us to do once we have that built is it eliminates our electric bills, creating space in our budget for between $700,000 and $1 million, $700,000 and $1 million a year. Presently, who's to say what that is? Electric rates have increased 3.3% every year for the last 40 years. And so we are effectively locking in that so that we're going to save that money. We're trying to create space in our budget so that we can stave off increases through efficiencies. So we don't spend $60 million to renovate all of these buildings. We spend $45 million to renovate our buildings and pace it over time. We can, because we're generating on our own electricity, when we put in air conditioning into this building, we won't just put air conditioning, we'll do geothermal, and it will do the entire building's heat and air conditioning, and it runs off of the electricity that we will be generating. And so there's another $300,000 a year that we're currently paying in gas. If we can convert to geothermal in all of our buildings, there's additional savings. So when I say we continue to look for efficiencies, that's what it is. If we save $200,000 a year in operating costs in the elementary school, and then we save $300,000 in gas, now it's $500,000. Right now, if we raise taxes $1 million, it gets us $1 million in revenue. And so that's where the $200,000 starts to add up. If you can save, if we can look for efficiencies. So I won't promise that we're never going to raise taxes. That would be foolish for the 2 decades from now, because boards can't catch up. But we don't anticipate any big. I'm not anticipating any big paydays for the district in order to do these things. That we're setting it up so that this, for the most part, is friendly to the taxpayer. Now, if we do what I think we're doing, which is improving our schools and becoming more attractive, I do think growth's going to come. And with that growth is additional tax revenue. And so, hopefully we can avoid. See, there's not a lot of industry here, and that's the burden that our school board has. In order to get more taxes, you have to go to the individual household, and because they're not building these big. I mean, I worked in another district, and they were going to build 3 big warehouses, and everybody in the district was upset with these warehouses, and they actually wanted us to write letters against these warehouses. There's $3 million in revenue from warehouses. That's savings to taxpayers as well. So I'm not advocating for big boxes, but with growth, hopefully there will be some relief on the individual residents. That would be.
So based off of the option that you're leaning toward, can you assume either 55 or 60 million over 10 years, so $6 million a year, based off of the current revenue and your projected savings, for operational savings? As far as that deficit goes, is it a couple million? Is it?
We just took a $15 million bond, which will do the first portion of this. That bond will be totally and completely paid for by our solar project. So, and then if we are smart and we don't, and this is the hard thing, because this is where people say, well, you need to do the next project now. There's people who say, we need turf. Well, the question is, how do we phase this so that we can do the things we need to do, have the things that we want, and not overburden so it's really when I say it's a 10-year fiscal plan, that's what we're working on, is a 10-year fiscal plan. We can't do it all at one time. And we're not, it's interesting. That bond, the rate that we got was 3.45%. And that's because the district's finances are really good. And what happened, I was going to write to you guys this weekend, but I was busy. What happened was when we issued our bond on the bond market, the municipal bond market, because of the financial standing of the district, there was $106 million that was offered up for our $15 million. There were 5 companies, banks, investment houses, that were willing to fully fund our project, just themselves. And what happens is when you have that much interest in a bond, it becomes like a negative auction. And so our broker says, okay, the rate's 4.09. Who's interested in this bond if it's 3.8% interest? And then who's interested if it's 3.6 and it got all the way down to 3.4%? So some people would say, well, why didn't you just borrow another 15 million? Well, because you have to pay it back. And the long-term strategy is we don't have that much revenue coming from solar. So it's again, pacing this over time to try to set the district up for success. If we do this right, 10 years from now, we should be in a really good spot where we don't have things hanging over us, and we can actually do it would be another 10-year plan. There'd be another superintendent telling you that the last guy was an idiot. So, anybody else? You guys have been fantastic. Thank you for being here. If you are interested in giving us some questions, what we do is we craft a response and put them out on our website. But thank you for being here. We appreciate it.